After hours of pacing, crying into her pillow, and whispering prayers into the silence of her room, Margaret finally made up her mind. Her heart still trembled, her thoughts still tangled, but something inside her had settled. A quiet resolve. It wasn't courage, not exactly, but it was something close. With trembling fingers, she walked back to the study. The hallway seemed longer than usual. Every step felt heavier than the last. When she reached the door, she didn't knock. She just opened it, her breath shallow. Bruce stood near the window again, bathed in the golden wash of the setting sun. He turned slowly at the sound of the door, and when he saw her, he froze, hope flickering quietly in his eyes. "I'm ready," she whispered. For a second, he didn't move, as if he wasn't sure he'd heard her right. But then, without warning, he stepped forward, wrapped his arms around her, and lifted her off the ground. A breathless laugh escaped him, a sound that cracked into a sob. His grip was tight, trembling with emotion, as though he had just been given the one thing he didn't know how to ask for properly. Tears streamed down his cheeks as he set her down gently, both hands cupping her face with reverence. "Thank you, Margaret," he stuttered, his voice thick with gratitude. "You have no idea what this means to me. I swear on everything I have left, I'll protect you. I'll protect our child. I'll love you, with everything I have left in me, every breath, every day." She blinked, her own tears rising now as she pressed her forehead against his chest. He held her close, the warmth of his embrace saying everything he couldn't put into words. And for a moment, in the middle of all that uncertainty, there was peace. Not perfection, but peace. That night, everything felt different. The moment Margaret stepped into the room, the air shifted. She wore a silk red nightdress, the shade he once told her was his favorite, though she'd never imagined he remembered. It clung gently to her body, flowing like liquid flame against her smooth skin. She had never worn something so daring, so revealing, yet tonight it didn't feel wrong. It felt right. For him. The lights were dim, but the soft flicker of candles cast golden halos on the walls. A bottle of red wine sat untouched on the table near the window, its glass glinting in the gentle light. And there he was, Bruce, standing by the edge of the bed in a black robe, his expression a storm of hunger and restraint. His eyes locked onto her like she was something sacred, something he had waited his whole life for. He stepped toward her slowly, as if afraid any sudden movement might shatter the fragile courage in her chest. His fingers brushed hers and lingered. Then, with a soft whisper of her name, "Margaret," he pulled her closer until there was no space left between them. Her breath caught as he kissed her, slow and deep, pouring all the emotions he couldn't voice into that single act. She moaned softly, surprised by how her body responded to his touch. Every kiss felt like a question, and every sigh from her lips, an answer. His hands moved to her back, sliding up her spine, into her hair. She gasped as he kissed down her neck, his lips like fire tracing every line of her skin. Her fingers gripped his shoulders, then threaded through his hair, as if trying to anchor herself in the moment. "Bruce," she breathed, and something in him trembled at the sound. He guided her gently to the bed, laying her down like something precious, something worshipped. As he hovered above her, his eyes didn't just see her body, they saw her soul, and she saw the truth in his. This wasn't about control or desperation. It was about connection. He leaned in, whispering her name again, this time softer, slower, as his hands explored every inch of her with reverence. Each movement deliberate, every kiss a promise. Margaret's moans grew deeper, rising with each wave of sensation. It was tight, unfamiliar, and she trembled beneath him, but he moved with care, patience, anchoring every touch. He whispered assurances into her ear, lips brushing her skin like silk. I've got you. I won't hurt you. Just breathe, Margaret." The rhythm built slowly, like a song written just for them. She cried out his name in soft, breathless gasps as her hips moved with his, rising and falling, responding to a language she never knew her body could speak. Her hands clutched at his back, then tangled again in his hair as he murmured against her mouth, "You're mine. You're everything." And when he stilled inside her, forehead resting against hers, hearts beating wildly in sync, he whispered through tears, "I'll love you with everything I have left. Even if I don't live to see tomorrow, I'll live in this moment with you." In that dimly lit room filled with flickering candles, soft moans, and whispered names, Margaret didn't just give him an heir. She gave him something even greater, hope. And he, in return, gave her the kind of love that burns quietly but forever. They lay tangled in each other's arms, her head resting on his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of his breath. No words were spoken. None were needed. The silence between them was full. The next morning, soft light filtered through the curtains, casting golden streaks across the room. Margaret stirred gently, her body still wrapped in the warmth of the man beside her. The air carried a kind of stillness, one filled with quiet reverence and a strange, lingering tenderness from the night before. Bruce was already awake, watching her with a quiet smile. He didn't speak at first. He just leaned in and pressed a slow, deliberate kiss to her lips. Light at first, like asking permission. When she didn't pull away, he deepened it, savoring the way her breath hitched softly against his mouth. Her heart fluttered, not from fear this time, but something closer to awareness. Connection. As he pulled back, she blinked up at him, then murmured, "Good morning, sir." He chuckled lightly, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "There it is again, sir." His voice was gentle, teasing, but there was a softness in his eyes that made her chest ache. "After everything, Margaret, don't put that wall between us." She hesitated, biting her lower lip. It wasn't just habit, it was safety. But as he pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her like a promise, the word fell away. "Good morning, Bruce," she whispered, and his smile widened, not with amusement, but with something deeper. Gratitude, relief. They stayed like that for a while, tangled beneath the covers, her head resting against his chest as his fingers traced slow circles on her arm. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of the weight of what they had shared, full of unspoken hopes, full of quiet fear. "We wait now," he said softly, breaking the silence, "and hope that last night gave us more than just a memory." She nodded, eyes fixed on the rise and fall of his chest. "And if it didn't?" He looked down at her, his hand lifting her chin so their eyes met. "Then we try again, but not out of pressure, not out of duty, only when you're ready." There was something in the way he said it, calm, certain, that made her believe him. She nestled deeper into his embrace, letting his warmth chase away the uncertainty that still clung to the corners of her heart. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And for the first time in a long while, Margaret felt like she wasn't standing at the edge of something terrifying. She was in the beginning of something new. In the weeks that followed, Bruce's condition quietly began to unravel. The decline wasn't sudden. It came in whispers. A cough here, a stumble there, a longer pause between breaths. Margaret noticed it all, even when he tried to mask it with jokes or that familiar smirk that once carried weight in boardrooms. But now, even his smile looked tired. Despite the fatigue clinging to his bones, Bruce insisted on spending every waking moment with her. He would call her to sit beside him in the garden, even when his hands trembled too much to lift his teacup. He'd ask for her to read aloud, even though his eyes were closed most of the time. just to hear her voice. And sometimes, without words, he would simply reach for her hand, kiss her knuckles, and press it against his chest like an anchor, like her touch was the last thing keeping him tethered to this world. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the sky blushed with hues of fire and rose, he asked her to sit on his lap, just like before. She hesitated, seeing how thin his frame had grown, how pale his face had become, but he insisted with a whisper, "Please, Margaret, just be near me." She climbed gently into his lap, curling her arms around his shoulders. He kissed her, not with the strength he once had, but with a quiet desperation, like he was trying to memorize her lips. His breath was shallow, but his heart was still full of her. "You smell like hope," he murmured against her neck, and she smiled even as tears welled in her eyes. But the very next morning, everything shifted. She found him collapsed beside the bed, a streak of blood on the white tiles where he had coughed during the night. Panic surged through her as she screamed for help. He was rushed to the hospital, unconscious, breath barely there. Machines began to hum, tubes were inserted, but Bruce didn't open his eyes. He had slipped into a coma. Margaret sat beside his bed, her hands cold against his fading warmth. The man who had once filled every space with power and presence now lay still, swallowed by silence. Her voice cracked as she whispered his name, again and again, begging him to wake up. It was in the midst of that pain that she felt it, her body slightly off, days late, dizziness. Something wasn't right, or perhaps something was. She bought the test with trembling hands, barely able to hold it steady, and when those 2 pink lines appeared, bold and undeniable, her knees gave way. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, falling to the floor. Her hands shook as she pressed them to her stomach. "Bruce, you're going to be a father." She returned to the hospital, the test clenched in her hand, and sat at his bedside, tears streaming freely. She leaned over, brushing his hair back gently, her voice a trembling prayer. "Please, just open your eyes. Just once. I can't do this alone. I need you. Our baby needs you." And as the monitor beeped steadily beside them, Margaret placed his hand against her belly and whispered again through tears, "You're still here, and so is your legacy." Margaret couldn't bear to leave his side. The sterile hospital walls were cold, unforgiving, but she stayed, curled up beside him on the narrow hospital bed, one arm draped across his chest, listening to the steady rhythm of machines breathing for the man she loved. Nurses whispered about how she refused to go home, how she talked to him even though he didn't respond. But to Margaret, he was still there, somewhere beneath the silence, fighting to find his way back. That night, as rain tapped gently against the hospital window, she lay beside him with her eyes closed, her hand resting over his. She had whispered prayers into the darkness, lullabies to their unborn child, and soft confessions into Bruce's ear, just in case he could still hear her. And then, something changed. A subtle shift in the air, a weak twitch of fingers, then a whisper. "Margaret." Her eyes snapped open. At first, she thought she imagined it, her heart stumbling in her chest. But then she heard it again, soft, raspy, but real. "Margaret, you stayed." Tears rushed to her eyes as she sat up, staring into his half-lidded gaze. His lips curved faintly into a tired smile. She cupped his face, breathless. "Bruce? Oh my God. Bruce, you're awake." He blinked slowly, his fingers brushing her wrist. "I missed you." She couldn't hold back the sob that burst from her throat as she pressed her forehead to his. "Don't you ever scare me like that again. Do you hear me?" His voice was faint, but warm. "I tried to come back for you." The doctors called it a miracle. Within a few days, he was stronger, still fragile, but no longer tethered to the machines. The day they wheeled him out of the hospital, Margaret held his hand like she would never let go again. The air outside felt sweeter, the sky brighter, and as the car pulled away, Bruce looked at her like he was seeing her for the very first time. That night, back at the mansion, she helped him into bed, fluffing the pillows just right. He reached for her wrist gently, pulling her down beside him. "I have something to tell you," she whispered. He turned to her, eyes full of wonder. "What is it?" She took his hand and guided it slowly to her stomach. "We're having a baby." He froze, and then his eyes brimmed with tears. "You're serious?" She nodded, laughing through her tears. "You're going to be a father." Bruce pulled her into his arms as strong as his body would allow and kissed her, slow, reverent, overflowing with everything words couldn't say. "Thank you," he whispered, his lips brushing hers. "You've given me everything I never thought I'd have." They lay together in the quiet, wrapped in each other's arms, her hand in his cheek against her temple. There were no machines, no sterile lights, no ticking clocks, just warmth, just love. "I'll be here," he promised, his voice soft and sure. "For you, for our baby, for however long I'm given." And in the glow of that night, they kissed again, not with urgency, but with love, deep and pure. It wasn't about duty. It wasn't about time running out. It was about finding forever in the time they had left. It had been weeks since Margaret's quiet vow, her promise to keep Bruce grounded in this world, no matter how much time he had left. Every day she watched him closely, silently counting moments, cherishing breaths. The doctors had said 6 months. That deadline had quietly passed, yet Bruce remained. Weaker, yes, but still holding her hand, still smiling through pain, still present. On a humid morning painted with hope and nerves, they found themselves back in the hospital, seated in a room that smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Margaret lay on the examination table, belly gently rounded, her fingers laced with bruises. His grip was steady, but she could feel the tension in his touch, the weight of anticipation in every breath he took. The doctor entered with a kind smile, rolling over the ultrasound machine. "Let's take a look, shall we?" she said gently, applying the cool gel across Margaret's skin. The room held its breath as the probe touched her belly. Moments later, the rhythmic pulsing of heartbeats filled the space. But something was different, louder, double. Margaret furrowed her brow. "Doctor, is that—" "Yes," the doctor said with a beam. "2 heartbeats. You're expecting twins." Silence struck for a beat before Bruce gasped. "Twins?" His voice trembled, barely more than air. His hand flew to his mouth in shock, then dropped to gently stroke Margaret's belly, as though he could feel both lives awakening beneath her skin. Margaret turned her head, tears brimming in her eyes. "2 boys," the doctor added softly. "Strong, healthy boys." Bruce let out a shaky, half-laugh, half-sob, running a trembling hand over his face. "2 sons. Margaret, do you know what this means?" She reached for him, her voice full of awe. "It means we're blessed." He exhaled, the emotion too thick to speak. For a man who had begged for just enough time to meet 1 child, this was beyond anything he had dared hope for. "I asked God for 1 miracle, and he gave me 2, he whispered, voice cracking with gratitude. The doctor smiled warmly. "You're almost there. Just 1 month left. And Bruce, I believe you'll be right here to welcome them." He nodded, voice heavy but certain. "I will be. I have to be." As they walked out of the hospital hand in hand, Bruce looked up at the sky, his heart swelling beyond measure. He didn't say a word, but his eyes glistened with gratitude. Margaret leaned gently into him, anchoring him to this miracle of a moment, 2 lives growing inside her, 2 reasons to keep fighting. The room was quiet except for the soft, rhythmic breathing of two tiny infants swaddled in blue. Margaret lay propped up in the hospital bed, her arms cradling their sons, two perfect little miracles whose very existence felt like a defiance of fate. Beside her, Bruce stood motionless for a moment, as though the sight of them had taken the breath from his lungs. He reached forward, hands trembling, and gently lifted one child into his arms. The baby fit so snugly against his chest, so impossibly small, yet carrying the weight of everything he had prayed for. Margaret watched him, her heart aching with joy and awe, as Bruce kissed the baby's forehead with reverence, then reached for the second, nestling them both close with tear-filled eyes. "I never thought I'd see this day," he whispered, his voice cracked but full of light. Margaret reached out and touched his arm, grounding him in the moment. "But you did. You made it." That night, as the hospital lights dimmed, the three of them lay side by side, and Bruce kissed her forehead and the tops of his sons' heads with every ounce of strength he had left. The man once bound to a timeline now held eternity in his arms, wrapped not in time, but in love. Sunlight poured gently through the tall windows, casting a golden hue across the living room where Bruce sat with both sons resting peacefully in his arms. Their tiny hands clutched at his shirt, their breath sinking with the rise and fall of his chest. Margaret, just a room away, hummed softly as she warmed their bottles, the scent of lavender from the nursery still clinging to her skin. Everything felt perfect. Too perfect. When she returned, the bottles cradled carefully in her hands, she paused at the doorway, a smile forming, until it faded. Bruce hadn't moved. His head rested slightly forward, his grip on the babies still secure, his expression calm, too calm. The air shifted. "Bruce?" she called softly, stepping forward with a growing tremble in her voice. No answer. Her heart thundered. She rushed to his side, her fingers grazing his face, cool, still. A sob rose from deep inside her as she dropped to her knees, clutching his arms, whispering his name again and again. He was gone. Yet in his final moments, he had held on for them, his sons, shielding them even in death. Through the agony, Margaret clung to one truth. He had fulfilled his promise. He had stayed long enough to meet them, to love them, and to leave a part of himself behind. Tears streaked Margaret's face as she gently lifted the twins from Bruce's arms, her body trembling beneath the weight of what had just happened. Though the room was filled with silence, it was thick with his presence, his warmth still lingering on the fabric where he sat, his scent still clinging to the collar of his shirt. She rocked the babies softly, whispering to them through her sobs, promising them that she would carry on, that their father's love would live in every bedtime story, every quiet lullaby, every step of their lives. As she looked into their eyes, so much like his, it hit her. Bruce was still here, in their laughter, in their cries, in their tiny hands that had once clutched his shirt. The man who had once counted his days had left a legacy that would echo through generations. And though her heart ached in ways she couldn't put into words, Margaret found strength in knowing she had known a love powerful enough to outlive death. Lesson: true love isn't measured by how long it lasts, but by how deeply it's felt and how far it reaches, even beyond goodbye. Subscribe for more heart-touching stories like this. Like if it moved you. Comment below. Would you be strong enough to carry on like Margaret did?